much for rejoining us today. This is the last of our 5 webinars, and it's great to see a number of folks coming back. And as you've probably recognized already, we don't have a PowerPoint up for you. What we're really hoping to do today is have some dialogue with folks who've either been with us the whole time, who have caught up on YouTube watching the webinars, or maybe just, hey, I'm going to click in and see what's going on and come in cold, in which case you are a brave soul, and we're particularly happy to have you with us. What we're hoping to do today is I wanted to just kind of share again the positive frame I had in an effort to pull together this series. Honey, would you find the chat box while I'm talking from it? Wonderful. And I think it's right at the bottom. And just to kind of share that again, and then to open it up to some dialogue about, and I thought we'd start with just sharing what's working well in your world as we try to reinvent these connections and this idea of connection with our students and their families and our communities that we're serving. I know we have a lot of folks who might not necessarily be educators, but I think that the efforts you're making to preserve and to reconnect with people are strategies and that can be useful in education. So I hope you'd still share. So my positive frame for all of this was reinventing connection, right? So how do we come out of this experience with that connection between teachers and their students' families that's in a better place than where we entered it at the beginning or middle of March, whenever the world shifted for your school district and your community? Because I think we have an opportunity, and we're at a time where parents are reaching out to teachers more than ever before, where parents need the support of teachers more than ever before. And so how do we solidify that, right? So if we all took up the guitar, right? We're all stuck at home. We've all got, if you're like me, you got a guitar in a closet that you've always meant to learn how to play. Still haven't picked it up, by the way. And you practiced every day, in your brain, there would be neural connections that were being made, new connections, right? That had never existed before as these sausage fingers try to find strings on a guitar, right? And the more we practice, the more solidified those neural connections would become. And eventually, like my son, who's been playing the guitar and the bass for a number of years, he can play in the dark. He can play when he first wakes up. He can play after he's been awake all day. It's natural. And so what I'm hoping that this experience allows is for those connections between students and teachers and family members and parents that are being explored in new ways, using new technologies, that we're able to solidify those things. And I'm really excited about that. I know that there's a lot to not be excited about, and I don't mean to gloss over that. And I appreciate that sometimes, there's this perspective that, and to steal Tom's phrase, that AI can seem Pollyannish, but in and amongst the suffering and the loss, there is opportunity for growth. And I saw a great image, and then I do want to open it up. I saw a great image on LinkedIn yesterday of the stages of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And below it said, the butterfly never thinks about going back to being a caterpillar, right? And so we've went through a painful metamorphosis, and we're in the midst of it, maybe even in the first draft of it. But I don't necessarily know that we want to go back to the way things were after this. In some ways, we wish for that, but I think in this area of connections with our students and with their families and with our communities, we don't necessarily want to. So I'd like to start, and I think when everyone comes in, you're on mute, and hopefully that's easy to figure out. But I'd love to start by hearing about what's working well for you as if you're an educator in making those connections with your students and their families. If you're not an educator, how you're transitioning or how you're translating what we're talking about into the connections with the folks that are important in your world.
I'm going to take notes so I can jot down all of your great ideas.
Yeah, and I encourage you all to do the same.
Who's feeling brave today?
And keep in mind, anything that you share actually is a gift to everybody else on this call who's probably here looking for what are the ideas that are working, or what issues do you have and how do we fix those and come up with solutions.
Okay, I've just I do a lot of intensive weekend teaching. I'm based in Ghana, and a lot of our courses are with working students on the weekends. Now we've just had, well, the first step was that the government closed down all the schools and colleges, and now we're on a 2-week physical lockdown in Accra and Kumasi, which are the major cities. So I've been trying to find ways to help my students keep learning. So the first step I took was that I adapted my PowerPoints that I'd usually use in the classroom. So I adapted those for individual learning, and in the sort of the vague hope that the students might actually contact each other on WhatsApp or whatnot, and actually try and do the group exercises together. I've done some experiments on Zoom, and I've had a sort of 2 or 3 students log into those, but the ones that did so enjoyed it. But of course, there's a 40-minute closure on Zoom unless you've got the paid-for version. And so I'm trying to set up something similar on something called Jitsi Meet. So that's all experimental. It's open source. And so they make a great principle of not providing any instructions, so you can enjoy the full measure of the learning experience in setting it up, which I've just done. And I'm sure the learning experience will continue on Saturday, when I've invited my students to actually try and come and use the thing. So we'll see what happens.
Jody, you were.
How do you spell Jitsi Meet? Can you type that into the chat, please?
Jody, you were saying that your district got something from Zoom that allowed them to move beyond the 40-minute window if it was education related. Is that true? Could we share that on the Facebook page?
And I'm not sure because I didn't actually click on the link, but I know that the administration in the district had talked about there was a way where we could work around that 40-minute time limit, but I'm just not sure if that has to come from the administrators at the district themselves. Okay. Like if I would have to request permission to do that, because I didn't try that yet.
Anyone else out there, educators, heard of Zoom making that accommodation for teachers?
Allison just put a link in the chat box.
Yes.
There we go.
So they do have, they're upgrading all K through 12 educators to the pro version, which you can go over 40 minutes. I work at a university, and I know our university always had access to the pro version as staff, but they upgraded all of our students for this quarter as well.
Wonderful.
But the link I have in there is for K to 12.
Great.
Awesome.
And of course, Brian, I'm not sure what they're doing outside the U.S., but maybe that's a place for you to, for you to contact them. I love the idea you were talking about using other social media and really kind of welcoming your students to utilize, some other forums for those group discussions that they might have. I think that's something for all of us to consider as well.
And I really loved the way you were talking about adapting those PowerPoints, to encourage the students to contact each other. I like that, hoping to get them to take ownership of their own learning and continue that learning outside of, an educator facilitating that.
Other thoughts on what's working well for you? Thanks, Brian. You know, I find myself thinking too, that as we're in this first draft, we have thoughts about how we're going to define success in making these connections, how our students might define our success in making connections, and how their families might define success. So we have these various perspectives, and then of course administrators in the district evaluating the work that teachers are doing. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts there on how we might understand the way other folks might define success? And if you're not an educator, maybe you're a parent of children who are in K-12 or in college. How do you view, how will you perceive your children's teachers being successful? Because I think that's valuable for us to hear about as well.
I would like to check in if I can be, are you able to hear me? I can't use my camera at the moment.
We hear you just fine.
Thank you. I'm Linda. I teach at a community college in an inner city. I've been teaching online with Zoom for a while with them. And it's a very difficult time for most. So here are the check-ins. I find it really important to just check in. Tell me something that is on your mind and tell me what you have hope about. And so, you know, here's the check-in. It can vary, right? One, well, I'm so bored, but maybe this will be over soon. And I'm really grateful I found some masks because I work as a nurse assistant at the hospital. And my aunt died from the virus last night. So, you know, we're really in a very varying space. And another two students, one works in the hospital. A lot of the folks work in healthcare. They lovely two students, Latino. The guy is in a physical therapy program. The young woman is a CNA, and they have a 7-month-old in-house. And very, very simple. I just sent a little jumpy chair. That's all. And I got a picture from the couple saying, okay, now we can study while she's jumping. So there's always something good. And they share assistance with each other, not just with Zoom. They also feel very, very privileged that the college bought Chromebooks for many of them who were used to having to go to the library to do all of their online work. So they have Chromebooks and they think they're very rich right now, and they're helping each other, and they're helping their faculty learn how to move to this remote. So there's always something that, and I think the community college student, I am biased, I won't say I may be biased, I'm very biased, that those folks who come from a space of having to do more with very, very less have appreciation for all things that move them in the direction of their dream. So I think checking in and then checking out. Tell me one thing that you got from this meeting. What is your one takeaway? And hearing their hopeful takeaways, things you might not have thought about, like the joke that someone told, which I wouldn't have remembered, or sharing a song about I'll Rise Up with the choir behind it with Alicia Keys. By the way, it's very, very good. Alicia Keys, I'll Rise Up. So those are the things. Checking in, checking out, so that there's something learned at every single session.
And I think that for many educators who are using Zoom, and you are with your fourth graders, that checking in, and it was neat to see them want to do their, how are you feeling today? What's your goal for today? That was really neat. But I think checking out as well is a really good idea. What's your takeaway from our time together? I think fourth graders could certainly handle that. Absolutely.
And I was really excited about that because I started that meeting with, you know, okay, guys, don't worry, I won't make you do the 3 questions. And they're all like, well, I mean, we could, it wouldn't really take that long, you know, and it just kind of reinforced for me, like you said, that, you know, kids in general love routine and predictability. And so that's something that they were used to from me every day, and they liked just hearing from each other. And it was really encouraging, and they seemed to enjoy that.
You know, another thing I heard her say was the ability of the college to provide resources. You know, some of these students needed a Chromebook. How do we check in with our students to make sure they have the resources that they need? As a parent, I would certainly think that that's a way I'm going to evaluate success, right? I'm going to evaluate, you know, whether or not my students have the things that they need. Any thoughts about how your district or how the teachers of your children, if you're in the perspective of a parent, how are we gauging the resources that children have?
I would, Shane, if you don't mind sharing, I would love for you to share what you posted. Just that notion of you were surprised that so many parents wrote back. And I love the synchronicity of discovering parents want to be involved. So if you could share what you were doing, that would be great.
I deal with adult students mostly. With mine, I do adult education, helping adults earn their diplomas. And we had our meeting yesterday, our staff meeting, and it was decided that I would reach out to them and see if they wanted any materials. And I was surprised so many got back in touch with me about it. So I'm running out to my classroom tomorrow, gathering materials for them. And they can't come in the building because our building's closed, but I can meet them outside like a drive-through, hand the materials, and explain that we're going to be starting virtual lessons hopefully on Monday.
Great. Oh, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
Jamboard, let's see, group posted. Janie, could you share with us a little about what Jamboard is? I'm not familiar with Jamboard.
Yeah, Jamboard allows for posting of Post-its really quickly. So I use it synchronously and asynchronously. I don't know if I could share my screen. Let me see if I have permissions. Oh, I do. If you give me a moment, I'll come back and share the screen. I'll bring up one of my Jamboards. So
Awesome.
For example, we're doing a wellness check for people and asking them to say how they're feeling. And rather than taking all the time, which, you know, we don't always have to go around the room, this way they can just post it really quickly. But I'll need a moment. Let me come back to you in just a moment.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
great,
you.
great.
It's also good to use the breakout rooms. I'm sorry, this is Linda again. And I have found it really helpful to use the breakout rooms in Zoom to have students do pair shares, and then at least they have one other heart who knows their story, and then they can report back.
Yeah, those breakout rooms and the functionality there is really great, and Zoom does have a lot of fantastic support, you know, tutorials that you can gain access to if you need to learn more about how to use a breakout room, how to give the permissions to someone. There's some great resources there. Although maybe you miss out on some of the learning that Brian shared about the learning opportunity by having to explore. All right, great.
This is Jeannie again. I'm not sure if you could see that screen. Oh,
We
sure.
can.
Oh, okay, it changed. Sorry. Here we go. Do you see this one?
Nice.
Oh, love it.
And so you could move these around. People could instantly write a new Post-it. And this is free through Google, by the way.
Love it.
And so people could say how they're feeling. And so I like that idea someone said about check in and check out. Then they can move their card around if they're feeling better afterwards, for example.
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah. And then you're able to give permissions to the other students in using that so you can see it in real time as they move. Yeah, and I love that for a comprehension piece as well, right? So how am I feeling even on an assignment? And that's really great. Thanks so much for sharing that. And that was Jamboard, and I think you shared. Yeah, you did. You shared a link for us in the chat box, so that's fantastic.
And I shared the YouTube video to the video. That's a video. It's not just a random. The video with "I'll Rise Up."
Oh, great! Thank you.
Gospel choir behind, very hopeful. Big crescendo, a lot of gospel choir, lots of lights waving in the audience. Just a real heart stopper, or starter. Let's put it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Other thoughts about defining success, folks? Or maybe you're able to connect with some of my hopes on coming out of this stronger together than we go into it. What's going to be different as we come out of that than if we were successful there?
Hi, this is Allison. So I've seen our staff who is maybe like unwilling to try new things prior to this have been forced into it. And for us, working with college students, a lot of them are not able to make our regular office hours. They're commuting, they're working multiple jobs. Their classes are go till like 9 at night and start at 8 in the morning. And I think that this is going to allow us to reach more. And it's not just staff. Students we always said we can do phone appointments. We can, do Zoom before, but they didn't really trust that. So I think that this is going to allow for more accessibility to services on our campus that I just don't think they're going to go away now that they exist.
And I am very hopeful that that's something that comes out of this from the parent and student perspective that, I think as educators, we're always telling people we're available, reach out. I want to help. I want to do what I can. And I hope that people really are starting to trust that.
And I think of something like, the other day you got the idea, I'm going to just put out a Survey Monkey. Here's some times I have available and do one-on-ones with parents. How many K-12 educators were using Zoom to do parent-teacher conferencing? I'm sure some, but I'm sure there's more now that feel comfortable with the technology. And when we think of how often you would have parent-teacher conference night and only 3 or 4 parents show up, now you have this new mechanism for connecting with parents who maybe didn't come because they had other children at home they couldn't find a babysitter for, or their work schedule. I think it's great. It's what we talked about the other day, that there's all of this new world of what's permissible and what's allowable because of this COVID-19 crisis that we're in, that I hope that others will kind of include in their professional toolbox. Yeah. This connecting toolbox, if you will.
And I do like that. I mean, I think most of us at one time had a phone conference, but especially when you're talking about student work or things like that, just that extra step of Zoom so you can share some things and just have a face-to-face conversation is important. And I will say, I think that the learning curve for educators in trying to get comfortable with some technologies that maybe we've only kind of sort of played around with before can be a little steep, but it is exciting. And I think it's another great opportunity where we can probably ask our students for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just really get them involved in that process.
Yeah, any thoughts on ways to get students involved in helping us to learn about these new technologies? Anybody asking students for their input or asking colleagues for their input on new opportunities, new options?
Yeah, I would especially love to hear if students have offered up some really intriguing or creative asks.
How about this? Oh, go
Oh, I
ahead.
saw Linda.
Oh, please go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I'm an early adopter, or as they say, on the bleeding edge of technology. Have been teaching online since 1992, but I'm not your usual suspect, because if I would walk down a corridor with one of my 19-year-old male students, they would always ask him the technical question. And so, and he would say, well, I don't know, maybe my professor knows. But so I'm not your usual suspect, which in many ways makes me easier to ask the question, right? Because I'm not going to make them feel a certain way, or I won't condescend to them. And so I think it's inevitable that students will have to help. And if I share one tiny thing with them, start hearing it from the faculty I'm helping, who won't go to the instructional technology department because they do feel condescended to. So I haven't been at the school. I'm retired or rewired, as they say. So they still call me up and I still help. So I think it's inevitable that the students will have to help, because once they learn something, there's something so empowering and encouraging to know something and to be able to serve. You know, as Martin Luther King says, everyone can serve. And when students are in the position of being able to serve with a patient and forgiving attitude that they have been gifted with, they love it. My students are always saying, I'm so glad we knew this stuff before this crisis happened, because now we're helping our faculty. That's getting me in good with so and so and so and so. And so, you know, I think it's inevitable that they will have to help. My vision's going, so they're like, oh no, there's that button, it's over here. So it can be a really fun, as you say, co-creation of how we're going to learn, and asking them, can you find out how to do this in a Windows or a Mac thing? How do you download Zoom? Don't forget to update. Yes, there's a lot going on now with the colleges saying, don't teach online with Zoom because somebody will show pornography on your thing. And so then the students come in and say, how is that going to happen? Well, it's not going to happen to you, because we're going to put you in the waiting room now and make sure that you're real. So there's just little tiny things, and then they go off and exponentially share it with their faculty. Like, don't worry about that. Just put the students in the waiting room, or get a password, or don't allow anybody else to share except the host. Those are simple things. And by the way, those were those were the tips. Don't allow anyone but the host to be the one to share. Put the people in a waiting room. Default to a password, maybe. Those are things that can fix it. And they love having that knowledge that brings them on a somewhat of an equal playing field as their more privileged colleagues.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I think about, you know, how could we take some of this opportunity to just directly ask students for their ideas on how we can make this opportunity a healthier one for them, so that they get the outcomes that they need. And I think it sounds like it works really well with college students, but I think it could work really well with second, third, and fourth graders as well. Their ability to learn and to share their learning. And you know, one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it to others, right? So their ability to kind of share what they're getting with us, it helps them to solidify their knowledge as well. Mm-hmm. You know, I wonder, folks, is anybody having a challenge that they'd like to share? Something where maybe the wisdom of the group, so to speak, can become valuable to you as we think about sharing some things with each other. Or perhaps
I'd like to Well,
Oh.
I'd love to throw something out. I just spoke with my niece this morning. She has two elementary school kids at home. I guess one of them has just started middle school. And she's been thrown into home teaching mom now. And she said between the two schools, they have more work to do than she said, I'm sure they didn't have this much work to do in school. And it's like 12 different learning sites because every teacher's using a different one. And she's just in overwhelm. And I'm sure everybody's trying to be as helpful as possible. But I would love to know if any of you have words of wisdom for a parent about how she might go back and engage with the teachers around coordinating that, or how have other schools made sure not to overwhelm parents so that they just don't do anything?
Yeah, it sounds like that's really a possibility in junior high and high school where you have 6, 7, 8 different teachers all being charged by the district with, hey, make sure construction continues. What conversations are they having together about those? Yeah.
And I think, and I know, I purposefully haven't shared all of the great sites that I know are out there with my families right now. I'm trying to just kind of space those out and say, maybe every 3 or 4 days, your child's also familiar with this one in case they've forgotten about it. But yeah, I don't want them to feel overwhelmed or feel like they have to participate in all these. But I know that I am in a little bit of a different situation than a lot of other districts where right now, as an elementary teacher, I'm not expected to deliver new instruction. We're still in a review mode right now as we were working out the kinks and waiting to see how many of our students might have access to the online learning thing. So I mean, I would just say to your niece, get her, if it's more of an optional thing, get the kids involved. Which ones do they enjoy and do they have experience with? And, kind of let them take the lead on them. Don't, if you don't want to do it, don't do it.
Well,
and if it's optional, if it's one of those, like you're saying, lots of different teachers.
Well, I think that's a good beginning. Or, when we've been inundated with resources, what are our underlying assumptions of what we're supposed to do with these resources? And so that's a good beginning for how her niece might deal with this feeling of being overwhelmed. Is, okay, what am I assuming I'm supposed to do with all of this? And then there might be a need to reality check or myth bust, right? By reaching out to those. By reaching out to those teachers and saying, hey, is all of this expected, or are these, which of these are suggestions, which of these are expectations? Because I think that there's need for clarity, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's a great question for the teachers too. What are, as a teacher, what are your assumptions about how I'm going to use this, or how often you want my student to be on that?
Yeah, good suggestion. There is a suggestion on chat that if there are people that feel this would be appropriate, how do you engage in conversations with colleagues, family, friends, for instance, from New York City, or family of students who have died from the virus or who are very ill? Great question, and really appropriate, it would seem.
Yeah, we had so I work on a team of folks here in New York where our job is to support the child welfare system throughout the state. And so we're located in different parts of the state, and we had a Zoom call yesterday. And my colleague who's in New York City said, hey, there's COVID-19 in my family now, and I just want you all to know I love you guys. And it was a moment of, geesh, what the crud do we do with that? right? And she's a lovely woman who I've known for years now. And, I think it was a moment for us to go, well, who cares about these silly tasks that we were talking about 2 minutes ago? How are you? And, how can I support you? And I think that that's a reality for us, regardless of the work that we do, right? So the first thing you did with your students was to try to connect with them and say, how are things at home? Do you have the things you need? How are families doing? Do we feel safe? Do we feel like do we need to get connected to resources and things that have nothing to do with fractions, which was the math unit you were heading into before we closed down, right? And so I think that there have been a couple of different suggestions over our time together of, checking in. And I think that check-in needs to be more than just the cursory, how you doing? And to recognize that as a people, we're kind of programmed to go, I'm doing good, how are you, right? And that's the way we all greet each other in the pre-COVID-19. Hey, how you doing? Good, how you doing? All right, and then let's move on. And to really make sure we're taking the time to know, how are you and how can I support you? And maybe that needs to be the first 10 minutes of our meeting, is just really making sure that we understand how others are, and that we take the time to share how we're doing as well, right? As we all sit here physically disconnected from one another. And I certainly don't mean to be the final word on any of this. I'd welcome the thoughts of anyone else.
Well, like I said at the very beginning, Michael, I am not an educator. I'm not a teacher. I'm a human resources professional in Seattle at an agency called Housing Hope, and I'm a part of these conversations because I truly value the principles included in this book here, and as well as being just recently certified as an appreciative inquiry facilitator. So I'm heavily driving the appreciative model here at my office. And so I'm listening to everyone talk about how you interact, and this is all great thinking, and I love the Jamboard thing. So, I'm not going to get into what do you say to someone who's just died. I'm not going to go there. I mean, it's just simply grieving. It's simply grieving. It's simply. So I'm trying to dial it back a little bit and say, okay, how do we deal with anxiety? And anxiety is rampant, whether it be a student, a teacher, or an individual. And I myself, as an HR partner, I ask myself, okay, as a willing HR partner who is deeply embedded in the appreciative model, right? I am there. I really am a champion. Okay, that's what my LinkedIn profile says. If you look me up on LinkedIn, I'm an appreciative inquiry evangelist. That's what it says, right? So I am listening to everyone, and where I come from is, diffusing anxiety. And we also here at our agency are involved in becoming a trauma-informed center. And the concept of trauma, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, the ACEs score. Any nods of heads that, ACEs score, is that really? So it is. So listening to how trauma relates and how people pull from their traumatic background, this and the triggers that happen. That's another piece to this, right? And so I am really thinking about this in terms of, one hand, you want to be realistic, you want to be acknowledging people. People are getting unemployed right now. I'm laying people off right now. Okay, that's an anxious moment. It's a moment that we have to stand with them, and at the same time, I do not want to lose my appreciative thinking through this. Now, and again, and I just was actually just flipping through some of the pages of the book here, and as David Cooper writer, maybe this isn't where he said, this book is anything about being Pollyannish. This is real stuff we're dealing with. These are real lives. And so I want to take this opportunity. When you think about conversations, you want to have conversations, that make sense. And I'm I am testing myself right now about this. Okay, now, so, I'm heavily involved in the appreciative thinking. I lead internal workshops on appreciative leadership. The leaders, I'm urging them to move down that path. Well, now we are in a crisis. We're in a crisis. And so we say, all right, coming together as leaders. And I'm a leader along with our other. And so helping them to move through this is a helpful thing for me to think through. And so diffusing anxiety using the appreciative tools would be an interesting conversation for me to have with anyone who might want to chime in on that.
I think that it's really important to recognize the feelings of anxiety and just the overall feelings of loss that folks are experiencing. And your discussion of trauma, all of us view the present situation or past traumas differently. And the reason why something might be traumatic to one person and not be a big T trauma to someone else is because of the resources that they have available to them, whether it be internally or externally. And I think that's why connection is so important now, whether we're dealing with the trauma of a job loss or dealing with the trauma of a loved one's loss, is that our ability to work through that is directly tied, and how big that T becomes is directly tied to the resources that we have. And in the present, and it's a shame, it's even called, social distancing. In the present, we're very isolated, and really we need to be, yes, physically distant from one another, but not socially. And I'd like to find whoever it was that decided it was to be called social distancing and shake them for a little while, because the language that we use creates the realities that we live in, right? And so we call it social distancing, and people feel it deeply. And so I really can't say enough how important it is. And you see the way social media has picked this up, every day you try to check in with 10 people, and there's all these different wonderful, I don't mean to be dismissive of them, wonderful suggestions for how we might connect more with each other. But that's really needed now. Your students need you in their life. Our loved ones need, and our colleagues need us in their lives. And even the folks who are being laid off by the organizations that they work for, they need to maintain those connections. I think to myself, we identify so much of who we are by the job that we have, especially for those of us who have an employer. I know that there's many of you who are independent contractors or consultants, but for you identify yourself as a teacher. It's your job. If you were to lose that job and to say, wait, am I a teacher? Am I not a teacher? Right? And it would change who you feel as a person, the way you define yourself. And
part of my value.
Yeah. And so I would hope that folks would recognize how important it is to check in on each other and provide those supports. Victoria had something great that she put in the chat room.
Yeah.
And I think something really pertinent, we have folks, in the world that we share, that don't speak, English isn't their native language. And do they even have a full understanding of the current crisis? And does their lack of understanding put them at risk, right? If I didn't know everything about how to keep myself safe, I'm at an increased risk for being in contact with folks who are sick. So I just wanted to really hear your voice there, Victoria, and say I think it's wonderful that you were able to get them some information in Spanish. You're working with ESL students, and a reminder to all of us to consider, are there language barriers in the students that we're serving, in the employees that we're serving, where we can help to make connections with them. I also teach at a community college that serves inner city students, and many of my students are actually Arab speaking. And I have failed to check in with them and say, hey, do you have all the resources you need to share that information with mom or dad? So that was really valuable for me I'm going to check in with them after we're done here. Because I know that our government does a pretty good job of translating things into a number of different languages, and it's something for us to think about. Victoria, I don't want to steal your thunder here. Is there anything else that you would add?
Well, I mean, what I realized in my conversations with them is that they didn't even understand social distancing. You know what I mean? They were still allowing their children to go out and play, and and I try to verbalize as much as I can, but that's why I needed to find the files. So now I'm going to go back in because I have a student from Egypt, I have another student, an Asian student, and one from Haiti. So I'm looking for translations for those 3 now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's particularly dangerous for their children to be out playing because of how easy the children are carriers without having what identity. They're asymptomatic, I think is the medical term. So they don't show anything, but they can bring it back to mom and grandma and great grandma. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it occurred to me, if we're scared, how do you think they feel when they have even less, fully comprehensible information than we do?
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to take a minute while we're all kind of processing that and just again say thank you to you all for joining us for this, and not that we have to wrap up, but it really is our hope that we keep that Facebook group kind of alive and well, and that you would allow us that opportunity to collaborate with you as a big group on challenges or opportunities for growth. And on the flip side of that, that you would allow us the privilege to celebrate your successes and your gains. So we love to hear it all.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any plans? Some creative hopes that you're working on as you move from maybe draft 1 to draft 6 to remember Austin's butterfly from our first day together.
I'll chime in here only because who's talking? Someone talking over?
No,
so I'll chime in again. The idea of normalcy comes to mind. Now, as I said before, I'm continue to urge our leaders to think creatively, to practice the appreciative model, to do upward thinking, to do upward spiral thinking versus traditional root cause analysis. And that's a standard phrase that we use a lot. I don't know if any of you have seen the Tolek video about appreciative inquiry. Bernard Tolek, he's out of France. He's got a very good video that I use in the training that basically it's kind of long, but the first 10 minutes are really great. So we use around here, we use a frame from his video that has a huge array of green dots with a few red dots interspersed. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but I capture that slide. And we use the phrase around here, look for the green dots, because you have an array of green dots on a screen with a few red dots interspersed, and his statement is, what calls your attention? And most people say red dots. Some people say green dots, most people say red dots. And essentially that's what we wind up doing. We're looking for problems to solve, ignoring the array of things that are working well. So that's become a little bit of a mantra around here. People have green dots at their cubicles and this concept. Now, it's not like ignoring the negative. It's not ignoring the negative. I need to let people know that. Come on now, you don't have to ignore it. But it means that the array of things that are going well dramatically overwhelm what's not going well. So again, back to my statement, I'm trying to, as we think about plans, I'm trying to keep normalcy. So I offered a Zoom conference to refresh our leaders on the appreciative thinking. I've offered to do some one-on-ones with them via Zoom or on the phone. I've raised that with my fellow directors last week, and it was too soon. They said we need to let them grieve, and I said, got it, hear that. no worries, kind of thing. And grieving has its place. We can appreciate that, right? You know, grieving, you know, you grieve. The challenge of grieving, of course, is that it can be a downward spiral, right? Into loss, grief, right? So I'm going to try, and I'm not going to push this really hard, but I'm going to try to offer this again, saying, what if, for anybody who wants to, you know, offer it, I mean, be a part of it. I offer a Zoom conference where we just chat about, you know, picking people who have already been through the training that I've done already, and say, now, how does this apply? How does this apply? Let's think about that. And it may be a little risky, but you know what? I trust our team a lot, because there's a heavy amount of buy-in on the appreciative model. So anyway, you asked about plans. I'm going to plan to try to offer that and see if it flies this time. So that's you know, my current plan in the midst of all of these mandates that are coming cascading down around leaves and federal legislation, and it's a myriad of stuff that but in the midst of it, you have people who need to find a way through it. So that's, you know, I'm just not going to give up on the concept that this doesn't apply even now. I'm not going to give up on that. And I can't tell you that I figured it out, but I truly believe, and I'm going to risk something with the group here. I don't know any of you, all right? I'm going to risk something that I'm going to share with you. It came to me just this morning. I'm a person of faith, and I read the Bible, and a while back, for my mother, I memorized Psalm 119, which is the longest psalm in the Bible, and my mother was a Bible memorization person. So it took me 7 years to work through that. And I was revisiting some of the words today in Psalm 119. And a phrase that jumped out, and I'm going to risk this here, so work with me here, because again, I don't know you all, but a statement from one of the verses, I can't remember which one it was good for me to be afflicted, that I might learn your decrees. I stopped. And I said, okay, it's good for me to be, how could that possibly be good? You know, you talk about affliction, right? And then it says that I might learn. Now that's easier said than done. And I have to be careful, and I'm not going to deliver this to my employees because we're a nonprofit, but we're secular and all that. I'm not going to go there. But for my own internal processing, that encouraged me this morning. Because I think we would all agree that in the affliction, the upward spiral of learning at any level can offset the incredible desire to spiral downward into, you know, panic, anxiety. So
yeah, how do we?
I'm sharing that with the group. I'm risking it a little bit, but I'm going to trust you all to kind of take that in your own way. Just again, as a partner alongside you to kind of just work this out, right? So.
Sure. No, I appreciate you taking the risk, and I think it really is something for us to consider. You know, what are the opportunities for learning in every situation, right? As you were sharing, I got to thinking when I used to work with teenagers, I would tell them that there's this model. It's called the self model, and it comes from trauma-informed care, and it says that we all need 4 elements in our life. We need safety. We need a way to manage our emotions, right? The emotion management. We need to recognize our loss, and we need to plan for our future, right? And so we need those 4 areas in our life, and if we ignore any of them, we do so at our own peril. And so we do need to take time to manage our loss, to be able to share our grief, to be able to process through that. And I hope that's valuable for those of you. I wanted to share one more thing, and I hope you won't mind my doing so. And I've already posted this on the Facebook page. But we're grateful for the chance to have spent time with you all. And I'm really thankful to Sherry and Jackie who've been with us throughout the day's journey. And we've been able to do this for free, and I'm really glad about that, because I know it's a time where folks are being careful with their funds. And we're not going to ask you for money, but if you have found value in this, we found a nonprofit that is doing some really good work. And so we just wanted to reference that. It's a group called Turn Up. And it's a group that is doing a lot of work in trying to help feed children who are in that K-12 range, who now aren't getting their free breakfast and lunch. And so if you found some value in our time with you and you're thinking, hey, I would have paid to listen to those folks talk, maybe you could make a donation to Turn Up. I don't know anybody there. We don't have any affiliation with them. But I think it looks like it's put together by the Discovery Channel and a group called No Kid Hungry. And it's just turnup.org. And so I hope that, again, if you're so led, consider making a donation. I looked really quick. They take as little as $10. And hopefully we've given you at least $10 worth of value in these couple of days together. So if you'll consider that, we would be really honored. And again, if you're watching on your phone or what have you, we did put the link on the Facebook page already, so you don't need to worry about doing it right now, but hopefully you'll have the chance to do that in the end. And so thank you for considering.
I want to just thank you all for being patient with me as I got totally pushed outside of my comfort zone with some Zoom chats, and I enjoyed the first opportunity to collaborate with my husband on a project.
Yeah, that was really neat. Very, very neat.
Yes, adventure is leaving your comfort zone. It has definitely been an adventure.
I used to have a t-shirt that said that. Yes, I just want to thank Michael and Jody for coming up with this idea and making it happen. And we have like 176 people that have joined over the 2 weeks, and some can't make it live, but they're using the Facebook, they're watching the recordings, and we're here as little or as much as you need us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you are doing with students and parents, no matter what their age, at this particular point in time. Thanks for being reinventors.
Indeed.
Is Melissa going to send out the seminar you guys are going to lead there in Orange County?
Yes. Yeah, we'll be sending out information to everybody.
It's actually on their website too, as well.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mike and Jody, so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Everyone.